The OJ Simpson murder trial divided the country, but now a private eye from North Texas wants you to question everything you've heard. He says the real killer wasn't OJ, but probably someone very close to him.
For 30 years, the daughter of OJ Simpson and Nicole Brown Simpson, Sydney Brooke Simpson, lived behind silence while the public turned her life into headlines.
I've never seen so much evidence against someone in a case that's gone to trial.
Courtroom drama and jokes. She knows that no verdict can ever erase a memory. To understand the truth, we must go back to the night that changed everything. The night that changed everything. On June 12, 1994, a wealthy Brentwood neighborhood was shattered forever. A young girl named Sydney was only 8 years old and tucked into her bed for the night. She was dreaming of childhood things while a nightmare was unfolding just outside her bedroom window. Her mother, Nicole Brown Simpson, was fighting for her life, along with a friend named Ron Goldman near the front gate. Sydney did not hear the struggle or the silence that followed. Los Angeles police were called to 875 South Bundy Drive, where they found a scene so terrible it would change history. 2 bodies were lying near the front gate in a pool of blood that showed a very violent struggle had taken place, and it was clear that someone had been very angry. Inside the quiet condo, the officers had to walk up the stairs very quietly on their tiptoes, because they did not want to wake up the 2 small children who were still tucked into their beds. They found 8-year-old Sydney and 5-year-old Justin fast asleep, while the nightmare was happening just a few feet away. And they had no idea their lives were about to be turned upside down. The police eventually had to wake them up and lead them out through a back door to make sure they did not see the blood on the walkway as they were being taken to a safe place. The police started looking for their father, OJ Simpson. He was once a celebrated athlete, but now he was a suspect in a terrible crime. The world watched as the investigation began to uncover details about what happened at the house on Bundy Drive. Investigators found a bloody glove at the scene, and they found another one at the home of OJ Simpson. There were blood drops that matched the DNA of the victims and the suspect. People could not believe that someone like OJ Simpson could be involved in something so dark. While the world talked about the evidence, Sydney and Justin were taken to stay with their relatives. They were just children who had lost their mother while the police were chasing their father across the city. It was a confusing time for 2 young kids who just wanted their family to be okay. Nobody asked them how they were feeling. Nobody explained to them what was happening. The adults around them were too busy dealing with the chaos to realize that the 2 people most affected by this tragedy were the smallest ones in the room. This was the moment that Sydney learned that the truth was something people were afraid to talk about. Even at 8 years old, she was already beginning to confirm a dark reality in her heart that the rest of the world would spend decades trying to figure out.
Coffins fooled the mindless mass.
For the nation, the reaction to the verdict is sharply divided along racial lines.
The most famous chase in history. On June 17, 1994, the whole country stopped to watch something unfold on television. OJ Simpson was supposed to turn himself into the police, but he did not show up. Instead, he was in the back of a white Ford Bronco with his friend Al Cowlings. The police were following the Bronco at a slow speed through the highways of Los Angeles. About 95 million people watched this chase, and it felt like something out of a movie. People stood on the side of the road and cheered for him because they still saw him as a hero. OJ Simpson was holding a gun to his own head, and he was talking to a detective on a cell phone. He told the detective that he just wanted to go to his house on Rockingham Avenue. He eventually made it home, and the police took him into custody while his children were hiding away from the cameras. This chase was the beginning of what people called the trial of the century. The trial lasted for many months, and it was on every news channel every single day.
The jury in the O.J. Simpson case has reached a verdict.
Mr. Simpson has now come back to the courtroom.
The lawyers for O.J. Simpson were called the Dream Team because they were some of the most famous and expensive lawyers in the country. They argued that the police were trying to frame O.J. Simpson because of the color of his skin. They presented a video of a detective using profanity which led the jury to question the evidence. One of the most famous moments was when OJ Simpson tried on the bloody gloves and they did not fit his hands. His lawyer said that if the glove does not fit, you must acquit. In October 1995, the jury gave their verdict. They said that OJ Simpson was not guilty of the murders. Many people were very happy and many other people were very angry. But the real victims were the two children who still did not have a mother and now had to live with a father the world was still watching. Growing up with a famous last name. After the trial was over, Sydney and Justin went to live with their father in Florida. They had spent some time with their mother's family, but a judge decided they should be with OJ Simpson. He wanted to give them a normal life, but it was almost impossible. Everywhere they went, people would point and whisper. Sydney tried her best to do well in school, despite all the noise. She attended Gulliver Preparatory in Miami, where she was known for being quiet and reserved. She did not talk about her mother or the trial with her classmates. She just wanted to be a regular teenager who could go to parties and play sports without being judged. Her brother Justin was also trying to find his way, and he became interested in sports just like his father. They were a family that was trying to heal, but they were doing it under the bright lights of fame. Sydney eventually went to college at Boston University, where she studied sociology. She wanted to understand how people act in groups and why society treats some people differently than others. She graduated in May 2010, and it was a proud moment for her. She had managed to finish school without getting into any trouble or garnering additional media attention. For a woman whose childhood had played out in front of the entire country, graduating quietly felt like a victory in itself. She was determined to make her own money and build her own name. She worked in the restaurant industry for a while and then moved to Atlanta to work as an event coordinator. She was learning how to be independent and how to navigate life away from the cameras. She knew that her last name was a burden, and she wanted to prove that she was more than just the daughter of a famous man. She was building a foundation for a future that did not involve cameras or courtrooms. Building a fortune in the Sunshine State. Sydney eventually moved back to Florida and settled in St. Petersburg. This was a place where she could finally start her own business and live a private life. She became interested in real estate and started buying small properties. She created a company called Simpson Properties, and she worked hard to renovate old houses and apartments. By the year 2015, she had already purchased over 13 different properties in the area. Most of these were bought with cash, which showed that she was successful and smart with her finances. She did not ask her father for money, and she did not use his fame to get ahead. She was a landlord who took care of her tenants and managed her buildings with care. People in her neighborhood did not even know who she was for a long time. She was just a hard-working woman building her own empire. Her brother Justin also moved to the same area and started a career in real estate. He became a licensed agent and worked for a big company. The two siblings were very close, and they supported each other as they built their lives away from the shadow of their father. Sydney even found love and started a relationship with a man named Stuart Alexander Lee. They were seen together at some events, but they kept their personal life very private. Sydney also made a big change to her health and lost a lot of weight, which made her feel more confident. She was finally happy and felt like she had escaped the tragedy of her childhood. But then something happened that would bring all the old memories back. Her father was sent to prison in 2008 for a different crime in Las Vegas. Even though he was away, she still had to deal with the questions from people who found out her identity. She stayed strong and continued to focus on her business and her peace. The final moments in Las Vegas. In the early months of 2024, the news broke that OJ Simpson was very sick. He had been living in Las Vegas after he was released from prison in 2017. He was 76 years old, and he was fighting a battle with prostate cancer. He had to go into hospice care, a place for people who are near the end of their lives. On April 10, 2024, the family announced that OJ Simpson had passed away. His children were at his bedside when he took his last breath. Sydney and Justin were there, along with their older half-siblings, Arnell and Jason. It was a very somber moment for a family that had been through so much. Everyone who visited him in his final days had to sign a legal document called an NDA. This was a secret agreement that they would not talk about what they saw or heard in that room. OJ Simpson wanted to keep his final moments private and away from the gossip of the world. The death of OJ Simpson brought back all the talk about what happened 30 years ago. Some people felt that justice had finally been served, while others mourned the loss of a football legend. But for his children, it was just the loss of their father. No matter what the world thought of him, he was still the man who raised them. They had a complicated relationship with him because of everything that had happened, and now they would never get the chance to resolve it. There were reports that Sydney had become more distant from her father as she got older and started to think for herself. She had spent a lot of time researching what happened to her mother, and she had her own thoughts about the truth. She did not make a public statement after he died, and she did not go on television to talk about her feelings. She just stayed in Florida and continued her life while the rest of the world argued about her father's legacy. She was a woman of silence, and that silence was her way of protecting herself. But while Sydney chose quiet, her father's estate was about to become anything but. The fight for the last millions. After OJ Simpson died, his money and property went through a process called probate. This is when a court decides how to pay their bills and who gets what is left over. OJ Simpson had a will, and he named his longtime lawyer, Malcolm Laverne, as the person in charge of his estate. The lawyer said that he was going to make sure the children were taken care of first. But taking care of the children would turn out to be far more complicated than anyone expected. OJ Simpson owed a lot of money to the families of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson. Back in 1997, a civil jury found him responsible for their deaths and ordered him to pay $33.5 million. He never paid most of that money, and with interest it had grown to over $114 million. The families wanted to get paid from whatever was left in his estate, and they were ready for a legal battle. For decades, the Goldman family had been pursuing OJ Simpson through every legal avenue available to them. His death did not end their pursuit. If anything, it gave them a new opening. The lawyer for the estate initially said that he hoped the Goldmans would get nothing. He was angry at them for how they had pursued OJ Simpson for so many years. But the law is clear, and creditors must be paid before any inheritance goes to the family. The estate was not as big as people thought it would be. The lawyer said it was only worth about $500,000 to $1 million. This was not nearly enough to pay back the millions that were owed. There were also claims from the government for unpaid taxes and from other lawyers who said they were never paid for their work. In November 2025, a big update happened in the case. The estate agreed to pay Fred Goldman $58 million as a settlement for his claim. This was a huge amount, but it was still only a fraction of what was owed. After nearly 3 decades of legal battles, the Goldman family was still fighting to collect on a judgment that many believed would never be paid.
Kim Goldman's sobs fill the courtroom. This is now an indelible image from that time.
It showed that the fight for justice was still going on, even after the man at the center of it was gone. The lawsuit that split the family. In January 2025, a very shocking lawsuit was filed that turned the family against itself. The lawyer for the estate sued Justin Simpson and his company called Primary Holdings, LLC. The lawsuit claimed that Justin had improperly taken ownership of the house in Las Vegas, where his father lived and died. The house was worth about $835,000, and it was located in a gated community near a golf course. The lawyer said that OJ Simpson used his own money to buy the house in 2022, but he put the title in the name of his son's company. This was a plan to hide the house from the people he owed money to, like the Goldmans and the IRS. The lawyer called this a fraudulent transfer and said the house really belonged to the estate and not to Justin. According to the legal papers, OJ Simpson was the one who paid the mortgage and all the bills for the house every single month. He chose the house because it was all on one floor, which was easier for him as his health got worse. After he died, Justin moved into the house and refused to leave. He claimed that the house was his because his company owned it. but the lawyer said that the living trust of OJ Simpson stated that the property should be shared among all 4 of his children. Justin was accused of trying to keep the equity for himself and not helping to pay the debts of his father. If the court sided with the estate, Justin would have to give up the house, and it would be sold to help pay back the Goldman family and other creditors. This lawsuit created a lot of tension because it showed that, even in death, OJ Simpson was causing trouble for his kids. Justin has a successful real estate career of his own, but this house has become a symbol of the greed and secrets that have always surrounded this family. The court will have to decide if the house should be sold, to pay the victims' families, or if Justin can keep it. And while the lawyers argued and the headlines piled up, one member of the family was nowhere to be found in any of it. 2 siblings, 2 choices. And that brings us back to where we started. While Justin was in court fighting over that house, Sydney chose a different path entirely. She made no public claim to any part of her father's estate. She filed no lawsuits. She issued no statements. She did not appear in any court documents or legal filings. She simply continued living her life in Florida as if the fight over OJ Simpson's money had nothing to do with her. And maybe to her, it didn't. She had built her own wealth, and she did not need a cent from her father. Her silence was not weakness. It was her way of finally being free from the shadow of the past. Sydney has worked hard to build a successful life as a business owner, and she has found a sense of peace that she never had before. The money from OJ Simpson's estate was always tied to a dark and painful history, and Sydney chose to stay far away from all of it. She chose to honor the memory of her mother, Nicole, by living a life filled with peace and privacy, rather than fighting over an inheritance stained by tragedy. 2 children raised in the same house, shaped by the same tragedy, surrounded by the same fame. They both lost their mother on the same night. They both sat through the same trial. They both grew up carrying the same last name. And yet when their father died and the lawyers started fighting over what was left, they responded in completely different ways. One stepped into the courtroom. The other stayed home in Florida and said nothing. Why do you think they ended up on such different paths? Was it easier for Sydney to walk away because she had already built something of her own? Or was there something deeper driving her decision? Something that has been with her since that night in Brentwood. Sydney is proof that you can choose your own path, even when the past is dark.